The smoke rose black against the desert sky, twisting like a dying snake in the afternoon heat. Clara Mitchell pressed her face against the wooden floor of her family's general store, splinters digging into her cheek as another volley of gunfire shattered the windows above. Glass rained down like hail, mixing with the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning timber. "Stay down, Clara!" Her father's voice cracked through the chaos. But when she turned her head, she saw him slumped against the counter, his white shirt blooming red across the chest. His Winchester lay useless beside him, one hand still reaching for it. The Apache war cries pierced through the din, high, ululating sounds that made her blood run cold. She'd heard stories at the trading post, whispered tales of raids and massacres, but nothing had prepared her for this. The thundering hooves circled the small settlement of Bitter Creek like vultures, kicking up dust clouds that mixed with the smoke. Through a gap in the floorboards, she watched her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, try to run for the church. An arrow caught her between the shoulder blades, and she crumpled like a rag doll in the street. Her bonnet rolled away in the wind, blonde hair spilling across the dirt. Clara's hands trembled as she crawled toward her father. "Papa." The word came out as barely a whisper. His eyes stared past her at something she couldn't see, already glazing over. She pressed her palm against the wound, but the blood seeped through her fingers, warm and slick. The front door exploded inward. 3 Apache warriors burst through, their faces painted in stark lines of black and red. The leader, tall, lean, with scars crisscrossing his bare chest, swept the room with dark eyes that missed nothing. He barked something in his language, and the others began ransacking the store, pulling down shelves, scattering flour and beans across the floor. Clara scrambled backward until her spine hit the wall. The scarred warrior approached slowly, moccasins silent on the wooden boards. Up close, she could see the notches on his rifle stock, each one a life taken. He studied her with the detached interest of a man examining livestock. "Please," she managed, though her throat felt like sandpaper. "I have nothing." He reached down and grabbed her wrist, yanking her to her feet with surprising strength. His grip was iron, calloused fingers digging into her skin. Clara tried to pull away, but he simply dragged her toward the door, past her father's body, past the overturned barrels and scattered merchandise that had been their livelihood. Outside, Bitter Creek burned. The church steeple collapsed in a shower of sparks, taking with it the bell that had called them to Sunday service just 3 days ago. Bodies littered the main street, people she'd known all her life reduced to motionless shapes in the dust. The warriors moved through the carnage with practiced efficiency, gathering horses, weapons, anything of value. Clara was shoved toward a paint pony, its sides heaving from the ride. The scarred warrior mounted behind her, one arm clamping around her waist like a vice. She could smell him, smoke, sweat, and something wild like sage and earth. As they wheeled away from the burning settlement, she caught one last glimpse of her home, now just another pillar of smoke rising into the vast Arizona sky. They rode hard through the afternoon and into the night, a war party of perhaps 20 braves and their captives. Clara wasn't alone. She recognized the baker's daughter, Sarah, slung across another horse, and young Tommy Morrison, no more than 12, his face streaked with tears and dirt. But as the hours ground on, she focused only on staying conscious, on not falling from the horse despite her body screaming in protest. The landscape changed from scrub brush to rocky canyons, from flat plains to rising mesas. They followed paths invisible to her eyes, guided by some ancient knowledge of the land. When they finally stopped to water the horses at a hidden spring, Clara's legs gave out the moment her feet touched ground. She crawled to the water on hands and knees, gulping greedily until the warrior pulled her back by her hair. He said something sharp in Apache, gesturing at the other braves who laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. One of them, younger with fresh paint on his face, approached with a length of rawhide. Clara's wrists were bound, the leather cutting into her skin. They gave her a handful of dried meat and a sip from a water gourd. Nothing more. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, they climbed higher into Apache territory. The air grew thin and cool. Clara's dress, once her Sunday best, hung in tatters, torn by thorns, and stained with sweat and fear. Her feet bled through her worn boots, each step agony on the rocky trail. The other captives fared no better. Sarah hadn't spoken a word since Bitter Creek, her eyes vacant as a doll's. Tommy whimpered occasionally, but had learned that crying brought only harsh words and harder riding. Clara wanted to comfort them, but she had nothing left to give. No words that wouldn't sound hollow against the magnitude of what they'd lost. By the second night, they reached the war camp, a collection of wickiups nestled in a valley between towering cliffs. Smoke from cook fires drifted up like incense, and Clara could see women and children moving between the dome-shaped dwellings. Dogs barked at their approach, and faces appeared in doorways, curious and hostile in equal measure. The scarred warrior dismounted and hauled Clara down after him. Her legs buckled, muscles cramped from the long ride. He didn't wait for her to find her footing, simply dragged her through the camp as warriors called out to him, their voices carrying notes of respect and something else, deference, perhaps even fear. Clara lifted her head, trying to maintain some dignity despite everything. The Apache women watched her pass with unreadable expressions. Some spat in the dirt. Others simply stared, taking in her pale skin, her tangled auburn hair, the defiance she tried to kindle in her eyes even as terror threatened to swallow her whole. They stopped before a larger wickiup set apart from the others. The scarred warrior called out, and an elderly woman emerged, her face a map of deep lines and old sorrows. She examined Clara like a horse trader, running gnarled fingers through her hair, checking her teeth, prodding her arms and legs. Whatever she concluded, she nodded to the warrior and gestured toward a smaller dwelling nearby. Clara was shoved inside the wickiup, where Sarah and two other female captives already huddled. The space smelled of smoke and hide, barely large enough for them all. Through the entrance, she could see guards posted, their rifles gleaming in the firelight. "What will they do with us?" Sarah finally whispered, her voice cracked and small. Clara pulled the younger girl close, feeling the tremors that ran through her thin frame. Outside, drums began to beat, a rhythm that seemed to match the terrified pounding of her own heart. She didn't answer because she couldn't bring herself to voice what they all feared, that death might be the kindest fate awaiting them in this valley of stone and shadow. The drums beat on through the night, and Clara stared at the wickiup smoke hole, watching stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small human tragedies playing out below. She thought of her father's last breath, of her mother's grave behind the church that no longer stood, of the life that had ended in smoke and blood just 48 hours ago. Tomorrow would bring new horrors, she was certain. But tonight, she was alive. Battered, terrified, and grief-stricken, but alive. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and sorrow, a small ember of determination refused to die. Whatever these Apache had planned for her, she would not go meekly. She would not dishonor her father's memory by surrendering to despair. The drums finally faded as dawn approached, and exhaustion pulled her into restless sleep. Her last thought was a prayer to a God who seemed very far from this savage place, not for rescue, but for strength. For if she was to die in these mountains, she would die on her feet, facing whatever came with the courage her father had taught her. The desert wind howled through the canyon like a lonely ghost, and Clara Mitchell closed her eyes, preparing for whatever fate awaited her when the sun rose over the Apache camp. The morning sun struck the canyon walls like hammered copper, and Clara woke to the sound of women's voices and clattering pottery. Through the wickiup's entrance, she watched the camp come alive. Children chasing dogs between the dwellings, women tending fires, the ordinary rhythms of life that seemed impossible in this place of captivity. An Apache woman ducked into their shelter, middle-aged with streaks of gray in her tightly bound hair. She gestured sharply, and Clara understood they were to follow. Sarah clung to her arm as they emerged into the light, blinking like moles. The other captives, a woman named Martha from a neighboring ranch and young Ellen Parker, huddled close as they were herded toward the center of camp. Clara studied their captors as they walked. These weren't the savage beasts of frontier tales, but people with their own patterns and purposes. Children peeked at them from behind their mothers' skirts, curious but wary. An old man sat outside his wickiup, working on arrowheads with practiced precision. The normalcy of it all made their situation somehow more surreal. They were brought before a group of elders seated in a semicircle, their faces weathered as ancient leather. At the center sat a man who commanded attention without effort, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen decades of war and loss. He spoke at length in Apache, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The scarred warrior who had taken Clara stood nearby, arms crossed. When the elder finished, he stepped forward and pointed at each captive in turn, speaking rapidly. Clara caught one word repeated, Taza. The elders murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, others nodding slowly. Then the silver-haired leader raised his hand, and silence fell like a blanket. He spoke directly to Clara, his English heavily accented but clear. You are strong, not break like others. He studied her with those penetrating eyes. This is why you chosen. Chosen for what? Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. The elder's face remained impassive. Our greatest warrior lies dying. No Apache woman may see his weakness. It is forbidden. But you, he gestured dismissively. You are nothing. You can tend him without breaking sacred law. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. I'm no healer. I don't know. You learn or you die. The elder's tone carried no malice, only fact. This is kindness. Others... He glanced at Sarah and the remaining captives. They become slaves. Maybe wives if lucky. You have different purpose. The scarred warrior grabbed Clara's arm again, but before he could pull her away, she found her voice. What about them? The others? The elder's expression didn't change. Their fate is not your concern. Clara was dragged away as Sarah called her name, the sound cutting through her like a blade. She wanted to fight, to refuse, but the warrior's grip was unyielding. They moved through the camp toward a wickiup set apart from the others, larger and painted with symbols she couldn't read. Spirals and lightning bolts, horses and human figures locked in eternal dance. The entrance was covered with a heavy buffalo hide. The warrior called out something, and a voice answered from within, deep, rough as gravel, tinged with pain. They entered, and Clara's eyes adjusted to the dim interior. The smell hit her first. Herbs and smoke, sweat and something else. The sweet, sick scent of infection. Then she saw him, and her breath caught in her throat. He was massive, even lying down. His body stretched the length of the buffalo robes, muscles still evident beneath skin marked by more scars than she could count. Each one told a story. Knife wounds, bullet holes, the raised welts of old burns. His chest rose and fell irregularly, and sweat beaded on skin the color of burnished bronze. But it was his face that held her. Strong features carved from stone, a jaw that could have been sculpted by God's own hand. Black hair spread across the furs like spilled ink, and when his eyes opened, fever-bright but still sharp as obsidian, they fixed on her with an intensity that made her step backward. So, he said in perfect, unaccented English, they send me a white woman to watch me die. The scarred warrior spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing at Clara. Taza, for this could only be the legendary warrior they spoke of, listened without taking his eyes from her face. When the warrior finished, Taza laughed, a sound like distant thunder that ended in a coughing fit. Blood specked his lips. Leave us, he commanded in Apache. The scarred warrior hesitated, then bowed slightly and departed. Clara stood frozen near the entrance, acutely aware they were alone. The wickiup felt smaller suddenly, filled with his presence despite his weakness. She could see the wound now, a festering gash along his ribs, angry red streaks spreading from it like poisonous vines. Come closer, little rabbit, Taza said, switching back to English. I won't bite. Not much strength for it anyway. I told them I'm no healer, Clara said, not moving. No, but you have hands, and you can follow instructions. He shifted slightly, grimacing. Unless you'd prefer to join your friends. I hear Standing Bear has his eye on the young one. The threat, delivered so casually, made Clara's hands clench. She stepped forward, chin raised. What do you want me to do? There's water in that gourd, cloths in the basket. Clean the wound, change the poultice. He closed his eyes. And try not to faint at the sight of a little blood white woman." Clara gathered the supplies, her movements sharp with anger. As she knelt beside him, she got her first close look at the wound. It was worse than she'd thought. Deep and ragged, the flesh around it swollen and hot. Someone had packed it with herbs, but they were old, needing to be changed. She worked in silence, trying to be gentle but thorough. Each time the cloth touched the infected flesh, muscles tensed beneath her hands, but he made no sound. This close, she could see details that made him more human. A thin scar through one eyebrow, laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw clenched against the pain. "You're different from the others," he said suddenly, eyes still closed. "How would you know?" "Because you're angry, not afraid." A slight smile touched his lips. "Fear is useless. Anger can be shaped into something stronger." Clara said nothing, concentrating on cleaning the wound. The infection ran deep, and she wondered if even a proper doctor could save him. As she worked, she became aware of the scars again. So many battles, so much violence written on his skin. Her fingers traced one unconsciously, a long slash across his chest. His hand shot up, catching her wrist. His eyes opened, dark and unreadable. "Curiosity killed the white woman," he said softly. "You're burning with fever," Clara said, refusing to show fear at his grip. "This wound is killing you. Everything dies." He released her hand. Some just take longer than others. She finished cleaning the wound and prepared a fresh poultice from the herbs left in the basket. As she worked, she felt him watching her, cataloging every movement. It was unnerving, like being studied by a wolf. "What's your name?" he asked as she applied the new dressing. "Clara Mitchell." "Clara." He rolled the name around like he was tasting it. "It means bright in the tongue of your people. Are you bright, Clara Mitchell? Bright enough to know this wound needs more than herbs and prayers." He laughed again, softer this time. "You speak your mind. That will either save you or get you killed here. And which do you think it will be?" Taza studied her for a long moment. "That depends on you, little rabbit, and perhaps on me, if I live long enough to have a say in it." A woman entered the wickiup, elderly, bent with age but moving with purpose. She spoke sharply to Taza in Apache, clearly displeased to find Clara there. He answered in the same language, his tone carrying an edge of command despite his weakness. The woman huffed but set down a pot of something that smelled of boiled roots and meat. "Twice a day," she said to Clara in broken English. "You come, clean, feed. No talk to others about him." She fixed Clara with a hard stare. "You see his weakness, you die, understand?" Clara nodded, and the woman departed, muttering under her breath. "Cheerful, isn't she?" Clara said, surprising herself with the attempt at levity. "That's Grey Dove. She thinks I should have died gloriously in battle, not waste away like this." Taza's voice carried bitter amusement. "She's probably right." Clara ladled some of the broth into a smaller bowl. When she moved to help him sit up, he waved her off, struggling upright on his own. Pride, she realized. Even dying, he wouldn't show more weakness than necessary. As he ate slowly, she studied the wickiup's interior. Weapons hung from the poles. A rifle, a bow, a lance decorated with feathers. Scalps, too, though she tried not to look at those. This was a warrior's space, every item speaking of violence and victory. "You're thinking you've been caged with a monster," Taza observed, setting aside the half-empty bowl. "Haven't I? Perhaps." He lay back down, exhaustion clear in every line of his body. "But remember, little rabbit, monsters are made, not born. And sometimes they're the only thing standing between their people and extinction." Clara gathered the supplies, preparing to leave. At the entrance, she paused. "Why do you speak English so well?" "Know your enemy," he said without opening his eyes. "I spent 2 years at the white man's school in Carlisle. They tried to kill the Apache in me." A cold smile curved his lips. "They failed." As she stepped outside, blinking in the harsh sunlight, Clara felt the weight of what lay ahead. She was to be nursemaid to a dying legend, a man who'd killed countless whites, possibly even people she'd known. The irony wasn't lost on her, saved from slavery only to serve the very embodiment of everything she'd been taught to fear. But as she made her way back through the camp, she couldn't shake the image of those fever-bright eyes, the bitter wisdom in his voice. Monsters are made, not born. She thought of Bitter Creek burning, of her father's blood on her hands, of the casual cruelty that had destroyed her world. Perhaps they were all monsters here, shaped by a land that demanded blood for survival. And perhaps, in learning to tend this particular monster, she might find a way to survive in a world gone savage. The sun climbed higher, baking the canyon walls, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed its hunting cry. Clara Mitchell, shopkeeper's daughter, walked among her enemies with her head high, preparing to return twice a day to the wickiup where death waited, wearing the face of a legend. The flickering light from the small fire cast dancing shadows across the wickiup walls as Clara entered for the evening tending. 3 days had passed since her first encounter with Taza, and each visit felt like stepping into a cave where some ancient predator lay coiled, waiting. Tonight, the fever had worsened. She could see it in the sheen of sweat coating his skin, hear it in the shallow rasp of his breathing. He lay still as death, only the slight rise and fall of his massive chest showing life remained. The smell of infection had grown stronger, mixing with sage smoke and the earthy scent of the dwelling. Clara set down her supplies, fresh water heated over the communal fire, clean cloths torn from her own petticoat, and a new poultice Grey Dove had grudgingly shown her how to prepare. Her hands trembled slightly as she knelt beside him. Each time she touched this body, she felt the strangeness of it. The heat radiating from his skin, the hard planes of muscle beneath scars that mapped a lifetime of violence. "You're late," Taza murmured without opening his eyes. "The women kept me working." Clara dipped a cloth in the warm water. "They had me grinding corn until my hands bled." "Good. Soft hands are useless here." She pulled back the old bandage, biting her lip at what she saw. The wound looked angrier than before, red streaks spreading further across his ribs like poisonous rivers. The smell made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to remain steady. "This is getting worse," she said, beginning to clean around the wound. "Observant little rabbit." His voice carried a thread of mockery despite the pain. "Perhaps you should be a medicine woman." Clara pressed the cloth against the infected flesh, perhaps harder than necessary. He tensed but made no sound, though she saw his jaw clench. "A white medicine woman among the Apache? How long would I last? Longer than you might think. We respect those who heal." His eyes opened, fixing on her with that unsettling intensity. "Though respect and trust are different things." She worked in silence for a moment, aware of his gaze tracking her every movement. The firelight played across his face, highlighting the strong bones, the cruel beauty of features carved by wind and war. Even dying, he radiated a dangerous magnetism that made her pulse quicken against her will. "You're afraid of me," he said suddenly. "Shouldn't I be?" "Yes, simple, direct. But not for the reasons you think." Clara paused in her ministrations. "What reasons then?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "Because I see you, Clara Mitchell. The fire hidden beneath that proper white woman exterior. The part of you that didn't break when your world burned." He shifted slightly, suppressing a groan. "That's what should frighten you. Not my reputation, but what you might discover about yourself here." She resumed cleaning the wound, disturbed by his words. "You don't know anything about me?" "No. Then why do your hands gentle when you think I'm sleeping? Why do you bring extra water when you know the fever burns hottest? Why do you look at my scars with curiosity instead of disgust?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm doing what I must to survive. Lie to yourself if you need to." His hand moved suddenly, catching her wrist as she reached for the poultice. His grip was still strong despite the fever, calloused fingers circling her skin like a shackle. "But we both know there's more." Clara met his gaze steadily, refusing to show how his touch affected her. "Let go. Make me, little rabbit." The challenge hung between them, charged as lightning before a storm. Clara could feel his pulse through his fingers, rapid and irregular. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the wild sage scent of his skin beneath the sickness. "You're burning up," she said quietly. "Save your strength for fighting death, not me." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or approval. He released her wrist slowly, his fingers trailing across her skin in a way that sent shivers down her spine. "You have spine," he said. "Good. Spine might keep you alive when I'm gone. You're not dying on my watch." Clara applied the poultice with practiced efficiency, trying to ignore the way her skin still tingled where he'd touched her. "I won't give them the satisfaction. Them or yourself?" He closed his eyes as she worked. "Tell me, what will you do when this is over? When I'm dead or healed? Do you think they'll simply let you go?" "I'll survive, same as I'm doing now." Survival. He spoke the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that all you want from life?" "It's all I have left." The words came out harsher than intended, carrying the weight of everything she'd lost. Taza was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost contemplative. "I was 15 when soldiers came to our winter camp, killed my mother, my sisters, took my younger brother to one of their schools. Never saw him again." He opened his eyes, staring at the smoke hole above. "That day, I stopped being a boy and became something else. Something forged in hate and hammered on the anvil of war." Clara found herself leaning closer, drawn by the unexpected vulnerability in his voice. "What did you become?" "What they needed me to be. A weapon, a legend, a monster to frighten white children." His gaze found hers again. "But you know what the funny thing is? Even monsters get lonely." The admission hung between them, too raw for comfort. Clara busied herself preparing the bandages, wrapping them carefully around his torso. As she worked, she became intensely aware of every point of contact, her hands on his skin, the heat of his body, the way his breathing changed when she touched certain places. "There," she said, sitting back. "Try not to tear it open again. No promises." He struggled to sit up, and this time, when she moved to help, he didn't refuse. Her arm went around his shoulders, supporting him as he leaned forward. For a moment, they were impossibly close, her breast pressed against his side, his breath warm on her neck. "Water," he said roughly, and she quickly reached for the gourd, grateful for the distraction. He drank deeply, and she watched the strong column of his throat work. Everything about him was oversized, overwhelming, a man built for violence and dominance. Yet here he was, dependent on her care, vulnerable in ways that went beyond physical weakness. "You should leave now," he said when he finished drinking, "before someone sees and draws the wrong conclusions." "What conclusions would those be?" His smile was sharp as a blade. "That the legendary Taza has been bewitched by a white woman. That would be inconvenient for both of us." Clara stood, gathering her supplies. "I'm nobody's witch." "No," he agreed, lying back down with effort. "You're something far more dangerous." She paused at the entrance. "What's that?" Unexpected. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Clara found her hands shaking. Not from fear, that would have been simpler. No, this was something else, something that coiled low in her belly and made her skin feel too tight. She pressed her palms against her cheeks, feeling the heat there. This was madness. He was her enemy, her captor, a killer of her people. Yet when he looked at her with those knowing eyes, when he spoke of loneliness and monsters, something in her recognized a kindred spirit. They were both creatures shaped by loss, hardened by necessity. The camp was quiet as she made her way back to the women's area. Most of the fires had died to embers, and stars crowded the sky like scattered diamonds. She thought of Taza lying in his wickiup, fighting death with the same fierce will he'd brought to battle. Tomorrow she would return, would again place her hands on that scarred skin, would breathe the same air, and feel the dangerous pull between them grow stronger. Clara Mitchell, who had been raised to fear and hate the Apache, was tending their greatest warrior. More than that, she was beginning to see him not as a symbol or a monster, but as a man. A complicated, dangerous, magnetic man who looked at her like he could see straight through to her hidden depths. She touched her wrist where he'd gripped it, still feeling the phantom pressure of his fingers. His words echoed in her mind, what you might discover about yourself here. Perhaps that was the real danger, not Taza himself, but what he awakened in her. The wild thing that had always lived beneath her proper exterior, waiting for something or someone to set it free. As she lay down on her thin blanket, surrounded by the soft breathing of the other women, Clara wondered if she was strong enough to resist that call, or if she even wanted to. The night wind sang through the canyon, and somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, lonely, defiant, and utterly wild. Clara closed her eyes and dreamed of fever-bright eyes and scarred hands, of monsters who spoke of loneliness, and of the thin line between captor and captive when both were prisoners of fate. The morning ritual had become second nature after 2 weeks. Clara would heat water over the communal fire, enduring the hostile stares of Apache women, then make her way to Taza's wickiup as the sun painted the canyon walls gold. Each day, she expected to find him dead. Each day, he defied those expectations. "You're humming," he said as she entered, not bothering to open his eyes. Clara stopped abruptly, unaware she'd been doing it. "My mother's lullaby. She used to—" She cut herself off, jaw tightening. "Used to what?" His eyes opened, genuinely curious. "Nothing. Let me see the wound." "Ah, we're prickly this morning." He shifted to give her better access. "Did Grey Dove work you too hard again?" Clara began unwrapping the bandages with practiced efficiency. The wound, while still serious, showed signs of improvement. The angry red streaks had receded, and the flesh looked less inflamed. "She had me scraping hides until midnight. My hands are raw." "Let me see." "The wound first." "I said, let me see." His tone brooked no argument. Reluctantly, Clara held out her hands. Her palms were indeed raw, blistered from the rough work. Taza took them in his own massive ones, turning them over with surprising gentleness. His thumbs traced the damaged skin, and Clara fought not to shiver at the contact. "You have small hands," he observed, "not made for such work. They'll toughen up, like the rest of you." He released her hands slowly. "You're changing, little rabbit. I can see it in how you move, how you hold yourself. Less fear, more fire." Clara returned to tending his wound, trying to ignore how her hands tingled from his touch. "Maybe I'm just too tired to be afraid anymore." "No, it's more than that." He studied her as she worked. "Tell me about the lullaby." "Why do you care?" "Because you stopped yourself from sharing it." "Now I'm curious." She sighed, knowing his stubbornness well enough by now. "My mother sang it when I was scared. Thunderstorms, nightmares, whenever father came home drunk from the saloon." She hadn't meant to add that last part. "He hit you?" "Sometimes. Mother more often." Clara kept her eyes on her work. "He wasn't a bad man, just weak. The frontier broke him in ways it didn't break her." "And you? Did it break you?" Clara paused, considering. "I thought it had, when your warriors burned my world, but maybe—" She met his gaze. "Maybe it just revealed what was already there. The strong survive, the weak perish. It's the way of things." His voice carried no judgment, only fact. "Your mother, did she survive?" "Cholera took her 3 winters ago." Clara's throat tightened. "She died singing that lullaby to a little girl in the sick house. Even dying, she thought of others first." Taza was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like a warrior in her own way." "She was." Clara blinked back unexpected tears. "She was everything I'm not." "You sell yourself short." He caught her hand as she reached for the poultice. "You've kept me alive when my own people expected me to die. You face each day in enemy territory without breaking. Your mother would be proud." The sincerity in his voice undid her. A tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. Taza reached up, catching it on his finger with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had dealt so much death. "Warriors don't cry," Clara said, trying for levity. "The best ones do." He brought his finger to his lips, tasting her tear. The gesture was so unexpected, so oddly intimate, that Clara's breath caught. Salt and sorrow, but strength too. "You're delirious from fever." "My fever broke 3 days ago." His dark eyes held hers. "You know this, just as you know why you keep finding excuses to touch me longer than necessary." Heat flooded Clara's face. "I don't—" "Yesterday, you spent 5 minutes rewrapping a bandage that was already perfect. The day before, you traced my scars while you thought I slept." His voice dropped lower. "Do you think I don't feel it too? This pull between us?" Clara jerked back, heart hammering. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" He sat up with only slight difficulty, bringing them face to face. Then why does your breath quicken when I'm near? Why do you lean into my touch even as you pretend to pull away? Because I'm human, and you're— She gestured helplessly at him. You're overwhelming. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't it? He reached out, fingers ghosting along her jaw. In my culture, we believe the spirits sometimes bind unlikely souls together, enemy to enemy, like iron sharpening iron. Clara should have moved away, should have slapped his hand down, reminded him of their positions. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, eyes fluttering closed. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she felt the calluses there, evidence of a lifetime holding weapons. This is madness, she whispered. Yes. His hand slid into her hair, pins scattering. Beautiful madness. A noise outside made them spring apart. Gray Dove entered, carrying the morning's medicine. Her sharp eyes took in Clara's flushed face, Taza's position, the hairpins on the ground. She said something cutting in Apache. Taza responded calmly, but Clara caught the steel beneath. Gray Dove's face darkened further. She set down the medicine with unnecessary force and stormed out. What did she say? Clara asked, hastily gathering her pins. Nothing worth repeating. He lay back down, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. You should go. Come back this evening as usual. Taza, go, Clara. His use of her name, rare and deliberate, made it a command and plea both. Clara fled, her hair still half undone, heart racing like a spooked horse. She could feel eyes on her as she crossed the camp, knowing looks, whispered conversations. Had everyone seen what she'd been too blind to acknowledge? This dangerous attraction that grew stronger with each passing day. She spent the morning grinding corn with unusual violence, taking out her confusion on the innocent grain. Sarah worked beside her, thin and quiet since being claimed as a wife by one of the younger warriors. The girl rarely spoke anymore, her spirit dimming day by day. He's going to get you killed, Sarah said suddenly, not looking up from her work. I don't know what you mean. Everyone knows. The way you look at him, the way he watches for you. Sarah's voice was hollow. They're already talking about it. Some say you've bewitched him. Others say he's claimed you without declaring it. No one's claimed anyone, Clara said firmly. I'm just tending his wounds. Sarah finally looked at her, eyes older than her years. My grandfather used to say that fire and powder shouldn't be stored together. You're fire, Clara, and he's something more dangerous than powder. Before Clara could respond, a commotion arose near the camp entrance. Warriors were returning from a raid, leading stolen horses and pack mules heavy with goods. But something was wrong. Several men bore wounds, and one horse dragged a body. The crowd gathered quickly, voices rising in grief and anger. Clara caught fragments of conversation, recognizing enough Apache words by now to understand. Soldiers, ambush, death. The body was that of Running Wolf, popular among the younger warriors. That evening, the camp's mood was dark as Clara made her way to Taza's wickiup. She could hear drums beginning, the rhythm different from celebratory beats. This was mourning and promise of vengeance. Taza was sitting up when she entered, fully dressed for the first time since she'd begun tending him. His war shirt was decorated with beadwork and quills, and his hair was neatly braided. He looked every inch the legendary warrior, despite the careful way he moved. You shouldn't be up, Clara said. My people need to see strength, not weakness. He was checking his rifle, movements practiced and efficient. Running Wolf was my cousin's son, good warrior, too young to die. What will happen now? Blood for blood. It's always been the way. He looked at her then, something unreadable in his expression. You should know. Some are saying the soldiers were looking for captives, for you and the others. Clara's stomach clenched. Were they? Does it matter? The result is the same. He set aside the rifle. Come here. She approached warily. He reached into a parfleche bag and withdrew something. A necklace of blue stones, beautifully crafted. Wear this, he said. I can't. It marks you as under my protection. His voice was serious now, urgent. There's talk of killing the captives in retaliation. This will keep you safe. Clara took the necklace with trembling fingers. And the others? Sarah? His face hardened. I can't protect everyone. But you can protect me? She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Why? Because of this morning. Because you're mine. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Whether either of us wanted it, whether it's wise or foolish, you became mine the moment you refused to break. Clara's hands shook as she fastened the necklace. The stones were cool against her throat, heavier than their size suggested. I belong to no one. No, he agreed, standing slowly. Even wounded, he towered over her. But you're under my protection now. That's not ownership, it's complicated. Everything here is complicated. Yes. He touched the necklace where it rested against her throat, fingers barely grazing her skin. Tomorrow, they'll hold council about retaliation. Wear this. Stay with the women. Don't give them reason to notice you. And you? I'll do what I must to keep my people safe. His hand dropped. All of my people. The weight of his words, the implication that she was somehow included in that category, made her throat tight. Outside, the morning drums grew louder, and she could hear voices raised in grief and rage. I should go, she said. Yes, but he caught her hand as she turned. Clara, be careful. Not everyone approves of this, whatever this is. She squeezed his fingers once, then pulled away. As she left the wickiup, the blue stones at her throat seemed to burn like brands, marking her as something she didn't fully understand. Protected, claimed, bound to a man who was supposed to be her enemy but had become something far more dangerous, someone who mattered. The drums beat on through the night, and Clara lay awake touching the necklace, wondering how a simple task of tending wounds had led her to this precipice. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new choices. But tonight, she was marked by Taza's protection, caught between two worlds and belonging fully to neither. Yet, somehow, that no longer felt like a curse. It felt like the first step toward something entirely new, dangerous, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The council fire burned high that night, casting writhing shadows against the canyon walls. Clara pressed herself against the rough bark of a juniper tree, knowing she risked death by being here, but unable to stay away. The blue stones at her throat felt like ice against her skin. From her hiding spot, she could see the circle of elders, warriors, and clan mothers gathered in solemn assembly. Taza sat among them, his presence commanding despite his recent illness. Firelight danced across his features, making him look like something carved from legend itself. The silver-haired chief, whom she'd learned was called White Eagle, spoke at length. Though Clara had picked up fragments of Apache during her captivity, the formal language of council was beyond her. But she understood enough. Gestures toward the east where soldiers waited, the repeated mention of blood debt, the way hands moved to weapons as speakers grew heated. Then something changed. A younger warrior stood, pointing directly at Taza and speaking with barely controlled fury. Clara caught words she recognized: weak, bewitched, white woman. Her blood chilled as other voices joined in, some defending, others accusing. Taza rose slowly, and silence fell like a blade. When he spoke, his voice carried across the gathering with quiet authority. He touched his chest, still healing, then gestured to his war record. Clara had learned each scar told a story the people knew. His words grew stronger, and she heard her name. Clara Mitchell. The debate exploded. Warriors leaped to their feet, voices clashing like swords. White Eagle raised his hand for order, but the damage was done. Clara understood with crystal clarity. She had become a point of contention, a weakness in their greatest warrior that some saw as threat to the tribe itself. A hand fell on her shoulder. Clara nearly screamed, but another hand covered her mouth. She found herself looking into the weathered face of Lozin, White Eagle's sister and a warrior woman whose reputation rivaled Taza's own. "Foolish girl," Lozin whispered in accented English. "Come." Clara had no choice but to follow as Lozin led her away from the council, moving silent as smoke through the darkness. They stopped at a wickiup set apart from others, and Lozin pushed her inside. "You watch what you should not see," Lozin said, lighting a small fire. In the flickering light, Clara could see the older woman's face was painted for war, black stripes across sharp cheekbones. "I needed to know—" "What? How your presence divides us?" Lozin's eyes were hard as obsidian. "You wear his protection, but protection has price. Always price." Clara touched the necklace unconsciously. "I didn't ask for this." No, but spirits have their own plans. Lozen studied her with uncomfortable intensity. You know what Taza is to us? A great warrior. More. Lozen added wood to the fire. He carries the spirits of our ancestors. In battle, he becomes more than man. He becomes the rage of our people given form. This is why no Apache woman may see his weakness. To see him vulnerable is to see our people vulnerable. But I'm not Apache. Exactly. You are nothing, so you could tend him without breaking taboo. Lozen's smile was sharp. But now you wear his mark. Now you are something else. Not Apache, not white. Something between. I don't understand. When Taza was young, barely walking, the spirits marked him. Lightning struck near his cradle but did not kill. Eagles circled our camp for 7 days. The medicine men said he would be our sword and shield, but also... She paused, choosing words carefully. Also that his path would be strange, that he would find his match in enemy territory. Clara's mouth went dry. You think I think nothing. I see. Lozen leaned forward. I see how he watches for you, how his fever broke only after you came, how he speaks your name in war council like prayer and curse together. This is insane. I'm his prisoner, nothing more. If you were nothing, Walking Bear would not call for your death tonight. Lozen's words hit like cold water. If you were nothing, Taza would not risk everything to mark you as protected. Clara stood abruptly, pacing the small space. I should leave, escape, remove myself from... You would not make it past the sentries. Lozen's voice was matter-of-fact. And Taza would follow. You think you know him, but you know only the man. You have not seen the legend. When he takes the warpath, mountains tremble. If you run and he follows, nothing would stop him. Not your soldiers, not death itself. He's just a man, Clara said, but even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. Is he? Lozen stood, towering despite her age. Tomorrow, he rides to prove he is still the weapon we need. Wounded, weak, but he will ride because Walking Bear questions him, because your presence makes others doubt. She moved to the entrance. If he dies tomorrow, it will be because of you. If he lives, it will also be because of you. This is the weight of the stones you wear. She left Clara alone with that terrible knowledge. The fire crackled, and outside, the council drums had changed rhythm. Clara recognized it now. War preparation. By dawn, Taza would ride out, still healing, to face whatever violence waited in the desert. Because of her. Because questions about his strength couldn't go unanswered. Clara stumbled from the wickiup, needing air. The camp buzzed with activity despite the late hour. Warriors prepared weapons, women packed supplies. Children were hustled to safe places. She made her way toward Taza's dwelling, drawn by a need she couldn't name. He was outside, adjusting the saddle on a magnificent black stallion. In full war regalia, he looked like something from nightmares or dreams. Eagle feathers in his hair, paint across his face in patterns that seemed to shift in the firelight, weapons hanging from his belt with practiced ease. You shouldn't be here, he said without turning. Lozen told me. About tomorrow, about why you have to go. Lozen talks too much. He continued checking the horse's gear. Go back to the women, Clara. This is madness. You're barely healed. He turned then, and what she saw in his face stopped her words. This wasn't the man who'd teased her, who'd caught her tears and spoken of loneliness. This was the legend, the weapon Lozen had described. His eyes held death. Do you know what they call me in your language? His voice was different too, colder, harder. Soul taker. Because I don't just kill the body, I take everything. I am very good at what I do, Clara Mitchell. Tomorrow I remind everyone why. You could die. Yes, he stepped closer, and she could smell war paint and leather, sage and steel. Would you mourn me, little rabbit? The question hung between them like a blade. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, anger and fear, and something else tangling in her chest. Don't do this. Not for pride. Not for you. The words were soft but implacable. Everything tomorrow is for you, so they remember why questioning me costs blood. So they see that Taza chooses what Taza wants, and the spirits themselves couldn't change that. He touched the necklace at her throat. So you stay safe when I'm gone. When you're gone. His smile was sad and sharp together. One way or another, this ends tomorrow. Either I die and prove Walking Bear right, or I live and things change forever. Either way, the man who rides out tomorrow won't be the one who returns." Clara grabbed his hand impulsively. "Then don't go. We could run, hide, pretend we're other than what we are." He brought her hand to his lips, the gesture achingly gentle against his war-fierce appearance. "I am Apache. You are white. Tomorrow we remind the world why that matters, and why, perhaps, it doesn't." A war cry rose from the assembled warriors, and Taza's head turned toward it. When he looked back at Clara, she saw the man retreating, the legend taking hold. "Go," he said. "Sleep if you can. Tomorrow brings what it brings." But Clara couldn't let go of his hand. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't die for pride. If you must die, die for something better." His free hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone in a gesture that had become achingly familiar. "And what would be better, Clara Mitchell?" "Live for it instead," she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Then he pulled away, mounting his horse in one fluid motion. "Watch the sunrise tomorrow. If the eagles circle 3 times, you'll know I live. If they don't—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. With a final look that seemed to memorize her face, he rode toward where the warriors gathered, leaving Clara standing alone with the weight of blue stones around her neck and the heavier weight of understanding in her heart. She loved him, the enemy, the savage, the man who represented everything that had destroyed her world. She loved his complexity, his terrible gentleness, the loneliness that echoed her own. It was impossible, forbidden, probably fatal, and absolutely true. The war party rode out before dawn, their cries echoing off canyon walls like promises of violence. Clara stood with the women, wearing Taza's mark, feeling the mixture of respect and resentment from those around her. As the sun broke the horizon, painting the world in blood and gold, she watched the sky. 1 eagle circled, then 2. Clara held her breath, fingers clutched around the blue stones, and waited for the 3rd that would tell her whether her impossible love would have a chance to become something more than a beautiful, dangerous dream. The morning wind carried the sound of distant gunfire, and still she waited, understanding finally what Lozin had meant. She stood between worlds now, claimed by neither, belonging to both. The weight of it should have crushed her. Instead, she stood straighter, lifted her chin, and watched the sky with the patience of a woman who had found something worth the waiting. The 3rd eagle never came. Clara stood until her legs went numb, until the sun climbed high and the women returned to their work, shooting her pitying or satisfied glances. 2 eagles had circled and disappeared beyond the canyon rim, and the silence that followed felt like a held breath before a scream. Gray Dove approached as Clara finally sank to her knees. "You wait for nothing," the old woman said, not unkindly. "Warriors know death. It is their bride, their sister. Today perhaps Taza embraces her. He's not dead." Clara's voice came out raw. "I would know. I would feel it." Gray Dove made a dismissive sound but helped Clara to her feet. "Come, there is work. Work helps when the heart bleeds." But Clara couldn't focus on grinding corn or scraping hides. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind replayed every moment with Taza, his fever-bright eyes, the way he'd said her name like a prayer, that final look that seemed to carve her image into his memory. Near midday, a commotion arose. Riders approaching, but not the war party. Clara recognized the scout yellow horse, his mount lathered with sweat. He spoke rapidly to the gathered crowd, gesturing wildly. Clara caught fragments. Ambush, soldiers, blood, many dead. "Which ones?" someone called out. "Who lives?" Yellow Horse listed names. Each one brought wails from women, stoic nods from men. Clara held her breath, waiting. But Taza's name didn't come, neither among the living nor the dead. "Where is Taza?" White Eagle's voice cut through the growing panic. Yellow Horse's expression was strange, awed, fearful, uncertain. He spoke at length, and Clara understood enough to piece together the story. The war party had been ambushed by soldiers with repeating rifles, pinned down, outnumbered. Then Taza had done something. Yellow Horse's gesture suggested transformation, becoming something other than man. He charged alone, drawing fire, allowing the others to escape. "But where is he now?" White Eagle pressed. Yellow Horse pointed toward the distant mountains. Alone, wounded, pursued by soldiers, but alive, or had been when last seen. The camp erupted in debate. Some wanted to send rescue, others said it was suicide. Walking Bear argued loudly that Taza had chosen his path, that a true warrior would return or die, not need rescue like a child. Clara found herself moving before conscious thought formed. She grabbed Yellow Horse's arm. "Where?" she demanded in her broken Apache. "Which mountain? Which path?" He looked at her with surprise, then something like respect. He pointed northeast, speaking slowly so she could understand. Devil's Backbone, a treacherous route even when healthy. Wounded and pursued? Near impossible. "You think to go after him?" Lozin appeared at her elbow, reading Clara's intent with unnerving accuracy. "Someone has to. A white woman? Alone? You would die before you cleared the valley." Clara touched the blue stones at her throat. "Then I die." "But I won't stand here waiting for eagles that don't come." Lozin studied her for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Perhaps the spirits knew what they were doing after all. She turned to a young warrior nearby. "Bring 2 horses, good ones, and supplies for mountain travel." "Lozin, no!" White Eagle interjected. "You cannot—" "I am old, brother. My battles are nearly done." Lozin's voice carried finality. "Let me choose this last one." Within an hour, Clara found herself mounted on a sturdy pinto, following Lozin through paths she could never have found alone. The older woman rode like she was born to it, setting a pace that made Clara's bones ache but covered ground with remarkable speed. They rode in silence through the afternoon heat, stopping only to water the horses. As shadows lengthened, Lozin finally spoke. "You know what you risk? Not just death. If soldiers catch you with me, they will think you turned traitor. Your own people will hate you." "They're not my people anymore." The words surprised Clara with their truth. "I don't know what I am now. You are what love makes you." Lozin's voice held no mockery. "It changes us, shapes us like river-shaped stone. Not always gentle, but always true." They climbed higher as darkness fell, following some trail only Lozin could see. The night sounds of the desert gave way to mountain silence, broken only by their horses' hooves on stone. Clara's hands went numb from cold and tension, but she didn't complain. Near dawn, Lozin suddenly reined in, holding up a hand for silence. She dismounted, studying the ground in the gray light. Clara saw it too, blood on the rocks, still damp. A lot of blood. They followed the trail on foot, horses left tied below. It led to a shallow cave, more an overhang of rock than true shelter. And there, propped against the back wall, was Taza. Clara's heart stopped, then hammered back to life. He was conscious, rifle across his lap, but his war paint was streaked with blood and sweat. A fresh wound bled through his side, bullet from the look of it. His eyes tracked their approach, wary until recognition dawned. "I'm dreaming," he said hoarsely. "Or dying. Either way, you're not real." Clara dropped beside him, hands already reaching to assess the damage. "Real enough to be furious with you. 3rd eagle, you said. Watch for the 3rd eagle. Eagles don't lie." His hand caught hers, weak but desperate. "You shouldn't be here. Soldiers are tracking the wrong trail," Lozin interrupted. "I laid false sign 2 miles back, but they will figure it out. We must move." "Can't—" Taza's jaw clenched. "Bullet's still in there. Every step drives it deeper." Clara looked at Lozin, who was already pulling items from her pack. A knife, herbs, cloth. "You'll have to do it," the older woman said. "My hands shake too much now. I'll guide you." I can't. I don't know how." "Then he dies." Lozin's voice was matter-of-fact. "Choose." Clara looked at Taza, seeing past the legend to the man beneath. The man who'd caught her tears, who'd spoken of loneliness, who'd ridden to war to protect her. Her hands steadied. "Tell me what to do." What followed was the longest hour of Clara's life. Following Lozin's terse instructions, she cut into Taza's flesh, searching for the bullet while he bit down on leather to muffle any sound. His body went rigid with pain, muscles cording, but he didn't cry out. Clara's hands turned red with his blood, but she didn't falter. When she finally pulled the bullet free, Taza's head fell back, unconscious. For a terrifying moment, she thought he was dead. Then his chest rose, fell, rose again. "Good," Lozin said, already preparing poultices. "You have steady hands for this work, steady heart too." They worked together to clean and bind the wound. As they did, Clara became aware of other injuries. Cuts, bruises, a gash along his thigh. Whatever had happened in that ambush, Taza had paid dearly for his people's escape. "The stories will say he turned into a spirit warrior," Lozin said softly. "That bullets couldn't touch him, that he fought like 10 men. Stories always grow in telling. What really happened? A man did what was needed. No more, no less." Lozin finished tying off a bandage. "But sometimes that is miracle enough." Taza stirred as the sun climbed higher. His eyes found Clara first, confusion giving way to something deeper. "You came for me. Someone had to—" She tried for lightness, but her voice cracked. "You Apache have no sense of self-preservation, and you whites have too much." His hand found hers, gripping with more strength than she'd expected. Why, Clara? Why risk everything? She thought of all the things she could say. About debts owed, about simple human decency, about the blue stones that marked her as his protected. Instead, she spoke the simple truth. "Because you would have come for me." Something shifted in his expression, walls crumbling like sand. "Clara! Soldiers!" Lozin interrupted urgently. She was at the cave mouth, watching the valley below. 6, maybe 7. Hour away, no more. Taza struggled to sit up straighter. "Leave me. Take Clara and—" "No!" Clara's voice cut like steel. "We all leave, or no one does. I can't ride." "Then you'll ride with me." She was already planning, mind racing. "Lozin, is there another path? Something the soldiers won't expect?" The older woman smiled grimly. "There is always another path, if you're willing to pay its price. North through the Devil's Throat. Dangerous even when healthy. But they won't follow there." "Then that's where we go." They worked quickly to erase signs of their presence. Getting Taza mounted was agony. He grayed with pain, teeth clenched, but managed it. Clara mounted behind him, arms around his waist to keep him steady, feeling every labored breath. "This is madness," he muttered, as they started up the treacherous path. "Yes," Clara agreed, her cheek pressed against his back. "Beautiful madness. Your words, remember?" He made a sound that might have been a laugh or sob. His hand covered hers where it rested on his chest, and she felt his heart beating strong, despite everything. Alive. They were both alive, against all odds. The path Lozin chose was nightmare. Narrow ledges above dizzying drops, loose stone that sent pebbles cascading into void. But it was passable, barely, and the soldiers' horses would balk at following. Hours blended together in a haze of concentration and fear. Clara's world narrowed to keeping Taza upright, watching for his signs of distress, trusting Lozin's guidance. When they finally descended into a hidden valley she hadn't known existed, the sun was setting again. "We rest here tonight," Lozin declared. "Tomorrow, if he lives, we continue to the winter camp." That night, as Taza slept fitfully beside a small fire, Clara kept watch. She thought about paths chosen and prices paid, about transformations that couldn't be undone. The blue stones at her throat caught the firelight, and she understood their weight differently now. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, not when she'd worn his mark, not even when she'd ridden after him, but when she'd held his life in her bloody hands and refused to let go. That was when she'd truly chosen. "No regrets?" Lozin asked softly, joining her vigil. Clara looked at Taza's face, peaceful now in sleep despite the pain she knew waited beneath. "None," she said, and meant it. "Good." Lozin stared into the fire. "The path ahead is harder than the one behind, but you are stronger than you know, Clara Mitchell. Perhaps strong enough for what comes next." Clara didn't ask what she meant. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight Taza lived. She'd found courage she didn't know she possessed, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free and utterly unafraid. She touched the blue stones once more and settled in for the long watch Guardian now, as he had been for her. The circle complete, the bond forged in blood and choice and something deeper than either. Strong enough, Lozen had said. As the stars wheeled overhead and Taza breathed steady beside her, Clara began to believe it might be true. The dust cloud on the horizon spoke of death coming. Clara stood on the ridge overlooking the winter camp, watching the cavalry column advance through the valley below. 300 men. Maybe more, their blue uniforms dark as bruises against the pale desert. "They found us," White Eagle said beside her, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. Someone talked. Someone always talks. The camp below erupted in controlled chaos. Women gathering children, warriors checking weapons, the elderly preparing to flee or fight as their strength allowed. Clara had seen this dance before, but now she stood on the other side of it, wearing Apache dress, her skin bronzed by sun, Taza's blue stones still at her throat. "Where is he?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Where he always is when war comes." White Eagle pointed to the war council gathering near the central fire, being what he must be. Clara could see him from here, tall, commanding, fully healed after 2 months of her care. The wound that should have killed him had become just another scar in his collection. But she knew the deeper wounds, the ones that only showed in quiet moments when his guard dropped. "I should go to him." "No." White Eagle's hand on her arm was gentle, but firm. Now is not the time. He must be Taza the warrior now, not the man who— He stopped, searching for words. "Not the man who looks at you like you hung the stars." A rider burst into camp, one of their scouts, his horse lathered with sweat. His message was clear even before he spoke. The soldiers knew exactly where they were. No accident. This was planned, coordinated. They would attack at dawn. Clara's mind raced. "The captives," she said suddenly. "The other white captives. That's why they're here. Someone escaped, made it back." "Does it matter?" White Eagle's face was stone. "They come. We fight. Some die. The wheel turns as it always has." But Clara was already moving, heading not toward Taza but toward the wickiup where she knew Sarah was kept. She found the girl packing meager belongings, her face gaunt after months of hardship. "It was you," Clara said without preamble. "You got word out somehow." Sarah's hands stilled. When she looked up, her eyes held no guilt, only exhaustion. "My husband left me alone for 3 days. I found a prospector, gave him my mother's ring to carry a message." Her voice was flat, dead. "I want to go home, Clara. What's left of it. Do you know what you've done? How many will die because I want to live?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Not everyone is like you, Clara. Not everyone can forget what they are, where they come from. Not everyone can fall in love with—" She gestured helplessly at Clara's changed appearance. Clara felt rage and pity war in her chest. Before she could respond, drums began. Not the war drums she expected, but something else. A summoning. The entire camp gathered in the central clearing. Taza stood with the war chiefs. But his eyes found Clara immediately. What she saw there made her breath catch. Not fear, not anger, but a terrible resolve. White Eagle raised his hand for silence. "The soldiers come for their people," he said in Apache, then repeated in Spanish for those who understood. "They think we will fight to keep them. They think wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara saw Walking Bear step forward, protest clear on his face, but Taza's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Any white captive who wishes to leave may go," White Eagle continued. "We will not stop them, but—" His voice hardened. "They go as they are. No horses, no supplies beyond what they carry. If they reach the soldiers, they live. If the desert takes them—" He shrugged. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was exile disguised as freedom, a test wrapped in mercy. Sarah and the 2 other remaining captives were already moving, desperate hope on their faces. "Clara Mitchell!" Her name rang out across the clearing. White Eagle was looking directly at her. "You are free to go." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye turned to her, Apache and captive alike. Clara felt the weight of decision crash down like a mountain. She could leave, walk away from this life, from the constant danger, from the impossible situation she'd found herself in. The soldiers would protect her, take her back to some semblance of her old world. Her eyes found Taza. His face was marble, revealing nothing, but she saw his hand clench at his side. He would let her go, would watch her walk away because it was her choice to make. That, more than anything, decided her. Clara stepped forward, unpinning the blue stones from her throat. The gathering held its breath. She walked to where Sarah stood with the other captives and held out the necklace. "Take this," she said quietly. "Show it to the soldiers. Tell them—" She swallowed hard. "Tell them Clara Mitchell is dead, that she died months ago in the raid." "Clara, no." Sarah's eyes widened. "You can't mean to stay. You can come home." "I am home." The words came out stronger than she felt. "This is my choice. Go, live, be free. But Clara Mitchell died in Bitter Creek. Remember that." She turned and walked back through the crowd, feeling their eyes like brands. When she reached Taza, she stopped, lifting her chin. "If you'll have me," she said in Apache, loud enough for all to hear, "I choose to stay." Something broke in Taza's controlled expression. He reached out, cupping her face with one hand, thumb tracing her cheekbone in that achingly familiar gesture. "You impossible woman," he murmured in English, for her alone, then louder in Apache. "She is mine. I claim her before all. Any who challenge this, speak now." No one did. Even Walking Bear remained silent, though his face was thunderous. White Eagle nodded slowly. "Then it is done. The white woman Clara Mitchell is dead. Who stands before us is—" He paused, looking at her with something like approval. "Who are you now?" Clara thought of everything she'd been. Dutiful daughter, shopkeeper, captive, healer. None of those fit anymore. She looked at Taza, drew strength from the pride in his eyes, and spoke the name that had been whispered about her for weeks. "Walks between worlds," she said. "I am walks between worlds." A ripple went through the crowd. Surprise, acceptance, even respect from some. It was a warrior's name, a name that acknowledged what she'd become. The captives left as the sun touched the horizon, small figures stumbling across the desert toward the soldiers' lines. Clara watched them go, Sarah clutching the blue stones, and felt a chapter of her life close with finality. "Regrets?" Taza asked beside her. "No." She turned to face him. "But now what? The soldiers won't leave just because you release the captives. They'll still attack." "Yes." His face was grim. "Which is why we won't be here when they do." The camp was already in motion, an exodus planned and executed with precision born of generations of practice. By full dark, they would be gone, melted into the mountains like smoke, leaving only empty wickiups for the soldiers to find. "And after?" Clara asked. "They'll keep hunting. Let tomorrow bring what it brings." Taza pulled her close, and she felt the tension in his body. "Tonight you chose us, chose me. That's enough." But Clara heard what he didn't say. The war was escalating. The army wouldn't stop until the Apache were destroyed or confined to reservations. Time was running out for their way of life, and she'd just tied herself to a dying world. As if reading her thoughts, Taza spoke again. "I won't ask you to watch me die in battle. When the end comes, and it will come, I'll make sure you're somewhere safe." "No." The word came out sharp as a blade. "You don't get to make that choice for me. Not anymore." She pulled back to look at him. "I didn't stay to be protected, Taza. I stayed to stand beside you, whatever comes." "You don't understand what you're saying. When the final war comes, then we face it together." She touched his face, feeling the raised scar along his jaw. "I've made my choice. Don't dishonor it by trying to save me from it." He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his face. "You humble me," he said quietly. "This warrior who has never known fear in battle is terrified of failing you." "Then don't fail me." She managed a smile. "Live. Fight if you must, but live. That's all I ask." The exodus began as full darkness fell. Clara rode beside Taza, no longer a captive, but not quite Apache. Something new, something between. Behind them, their abandoned camp stood empty, waiting for soldiers who would find only shadows and dust. Somewhere in the darkness, Sarah and the others struggled toward salvation or death. Clara said a silent prayer for them, for the life she might have had if she'd made a different choice. But as Taza's hand found hers in the darkness, as the tribe moved like ghosts through landscape that had become home, she knew she was where she belonged. The war would come. Blood would flow, and their world would likely burn. But tonight she rode with her chosen people, with the man who'd taught her that enemy and beloved could be the same person, that home was not a place, but a decision renewed each day. Clara Mitchell was dead. In her place rode walks between worlds, and she would not look back. The mountains swallowed them whole, and when dawn came, the soldiers found only empty dwellings and the whisper of wind through abandoned wickiups. But high in the hidden valleys, a woman who'd found herself in losing everything rode toward an uncertain future, her hand in that of a legend, her heart finally, truly free. The battle came with the spring rains, turning the desert valley into a field of mud and blood. Clara pressed herself against the rocky outcrop, her rifle steady despite the chaos erupting below. 3 months had passed since she'd chosen to stay. 3 months of running, hiding, small victories, and larger losses. Now, it seemed, the running was over. "Stay down!" Taza's voice carried over the gunfire. He was 20 yards to her left, leading a group of warriors and holding the high ground. Even from here, she could see the controlled fury in his movements, the deadly precision that had made him legend. The army had brought everything: cavalry, infantry, even artillery that boomed like thunder gods. Against them, the Apache had courage, knowledge of the land, and desperation. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. A soldier broke through their line, rifle aimed at a group of fleeing women and children. Clara didn't think. Her shot took him center mass, watched him crumple. Once the sight would have horrified her. Now she felt only grim necessity. This was survival. Nothing more or less. "Clara!" She turned at Lozen's call. The older woman was gesturing frantically from a covered position. Clara ran, sliding in beside her as bullets whined overhead. "The children!" Lozen gasped, a spreading red stain on her side. "Hidden in the cave. Someone must—" "I'll go." Clara was already moving, but Lozen caught her arm. "No, your place is elsewhere." She pressed something into Clara's hand, a small leather pouch. "For later, when you need strength. Now go to him. Go!" Clara wanted to argue, but the light was already fading from Lozen's eyes. The warrior woman who'd shown her strength could take many forms died as she'd lived, thinking of others first. The Apache line was breaking. Clara could see it, feel it in the way the war cries turned desperate. She fought her way toward Taza, past the dead and dying, her dress now torn and muddied beyond recognition. She found him rallying the last defenders, his face painted for war, but his eyes holding the knowledge of defeat. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression. "You should have run when I told you," he said, pulling her behind cover as grape shots shattered the rocks around them. "We've discussed this." She checked her ammunition. 3 rounds left. "I don't run. Stubborn woman." But his hand found hers, squeezing once. "Listen, White Eagle is dead. Walking Bear fell an hour ago. When this position falls, then we fall with it. No." His voice turned to iron. "You live. You must live." Before she could protest, a bugle sounded. The soldiers were massing for a final assault. Clara could see them forming ranks, preparing to sweep away the last Apache resistance. That's when Taza did something that stopped her heart. He stood, stepping into the open, and called out in perfect English, "Colonel Morrison, I know you're there. I have something you want." The firing slowed. Stopped. A voice called back, "Identify yourself! I am Taza, the one you call Soul Taker." His voice carried across the battlefield with terrible clarity. "I have information about your captives, but I'll only speak to you. Alone." Taza, "No," Clara whispered, but he was already moving. A figure emerged from the soldiers' lines, tall, graying, with the bearing of a career military man. Colonel Morrison, the architect of this campaign. He walked forward slowly, hands visible but near his sidearm. They met in the middle of the battlefield, 2 men surrounded by the dead. Clara couldn't hear their words, but she saw Taza gesture toward the Apache positions, saw Morrison's face change as he listened. Then Taza turned, looking directly at her, and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "There is a white woman among us, Clara Mitchell, taken from Bitter Creek. She lives. She's been my prisoner." The pause before prisoner was barely noticeable, but Clara heard it. I will release her to you in exchange for safe passage for the surviving women and children." "No!" The word tore from Clara's throat. She broke cover, running toward them. "I won't." Taza caught her as she reached them, his arms iron around her. "Be still," he murmured in Apache. "Trust me, one last time." Colonel Morrison studied her, her Apache dress, her sun-darkened skin, the desperate way she clung to Taza. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Miss Mitchell," he said carefully, "are you, well? Have you been harmed?" Clara felt Taza's hands tighten on her arms. This was it, the moment of choice that would echo through eternity. She could tell the truth, claim her place at Taza's side, likely die with him in the next few minutes. Or, she looked up at Taza's face, saw what he was asking her to do, saw the love there, the desperate need for her to live, even if it meant living without him. He'd asked her to trust him one last time. Her voice cracked. She tried again, louder. "I've been held prisoner, forced to serve them." The words tasted like ashes. "Please, I just want to go home." Something died in Taza's eyes, even as his face remained stoic. But he played his part, shoving her toward Morrison. "Take her then. And remember your promise. Safe passage for the others." Morrison caught Clara's arm, steadying her. "You have my word. Women and children will not be harmed." He studied Taza with something like respect. "And you? I'm a warrior. I die as one." Taza straightened, every inch the legend. "But first, I see my people to safety." It happened so fast. Another Apache warrior, young and full of rage, saw Clara in Morrison's grasp and raised his rifle. Taza moved without thought, stepping between them. The shot meant for Morrison took him in the chest, spinning him into the mud. "No!" Clara tore free, dropping to her knees beside him. Blood spread across his war shirt, mixing with the paint and mud. "No, no, no." His hand found her face, thumb tracing that familiar path along her cheekbone. "My choice," he whispered. "You live, for both of us." "I can't. I won't." "You will." His voice was fading but still held command. "Because you're stronger than you know. Because our story doesn't end here." He pressed something into her hand. A small carved stone wolf. "Remember," Colonel Morrison was calling for a medic. Soldiers were moving in. The world was chaos, but Clara saw only Taza's face, the light leaving his dark eyes. "I love you," she said in Apache, not caring who heard. "I choose you. I'll always choose you." His lips curved in that sharp, beautiful smile. "And I choose the fire. Always." His hand fell away from her face. "Now go, live. That's an order." Soldiers pulled her away as the medic worked over Taza's still form. She fought them, screaming, but they were too many, too strong. The last thing she saw was his body in the mud, surrounded by enemies who'd never understood what they were destroying. Colonel Morrison wrapped a blanket around her shoulders as they reached the army lines. "You're safe now, Miss Mitchell. It's over." Safe. Over. The words meant nothing. Clara clutched the carved wolf, felt Lozen's pouch in her other hand, and stared at the battlefield where everything she'd chosen lay dying. "Ma'am?" A young lieutenant appeared. "We need to get you to the medical tent. You've been through—" "I've been through nothing," Clara said, her voice empty as winter wind. "Clara Mitchell has been through nothing at all." Because Clara Mitchell was dead, had died that day in Bitter Creek, and walks between worlds, she had died in the mud of this nameless valley, holding the hand of a legend who'd taught her that love could bloom even in the harshest ground. What remained was something else, someone else, a woman who would live because she'd been ordered to, who would carry the memory of blue stones and fever-bright eyes, of a giant's gentle hands, and a warrior's last gift. The rain began as they led her away, washing the blood into the earth, carrying away the last traces of a world that would never come again. But in her hands, a carved wolf remained warm, and somewhere in her heart, a fire that would never die continued to burn. She would live. She had no choice, but she would live as he'd taught her, choosing the flame over the ashes, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. The army recorded it as a victory. History would remember it as one more step in the pacification of the Apache, but Clara would remember it as the day she learned that some loves are worth any price, even the price of living on after they're gone. especially then. Thank you for listening to this story of love and loss in the American frontier. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share what Clara and Taza's journey meant to you.